Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of Self-Modifying Code. I am your host, Code Marvelous, and today we are doing the third of our Project NISEI board interview series. Joining me today is none other than Austin Mills, the Organized Play Manager for Project NISEI. Austin, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm a huge fan.
I really appreciate that. So, we're going to be talking tonight about the future of Netrunner from organized play, meaning meet space, meetups, tournaments, events, large gatherings of Netrunners going forward now that official support has ended. But before we get into that, I want our audience to be able to get to know you a little bit better, find out a little bit more about your connection to the game and what kind of your vision is for this going forward. And then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what NISEI has planned and where we go from here. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sure.
So to start off, Austin, tell me a little bit about your Netrunner story. When did you start playing? How did you get introduced to the game?
So right when the first core set came out, I saw it, on the shelf at my local game store. I picked it up because it looked pretty cool. Card games are very much up my alley. I'm not a huge board gamer, but I played Magic kind of semi-competitively for 9 years. So any new card game was definitely interesting to me. I played it with a Magic the Gathering friend, and it was a bit too complicated for him, so it kind of went back on my shelf and sat there for a good year and a half. Fast forward, after that year and a half, I went into a cigar shop that I frequented, and I ran into a buddy that I went to college with, and we sat down, we were catching up, and he's like, "Hey, check out this cool game," and he pulled out his Netrunner cards, and he had this PE deck with Archer and Corporate Troubleshooter and Roto Turret, and it was very degenerate and very cool, and I just fell in love with the game. And we went back to that cigar shop every night for 2 weeks, just playing Netrunner. I bought all the expansions I was missing, and then he took me to a GNK, and I was sold on the game for sure.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today, I just finished top 16 at Magnum Opus. I've traveled across the Atlantic twice to play Netrunner, all around the US and Canada, and I'm super excited to do a lot more of that in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you're what a way to close official organized play. Top 16 finish was just really fantastic. There was a lot of really lovely competitors in the top cut this year.
Yeah, for sure. I was super stoked. I did very poorly at Gen Con, and my day at Magnum Opus started out with me getting swept, and I was like, well, it's over. This is the end. And then I just didn't lose any games.
Yeah, you were a submarine.
I was the submarine captain, Dan.
Yeah, you made it, though, and that's the important thing.
I did.
So let's talk a little bit about, a lot of the people that I've had on for these interviews, they have similar stories about, kind of falling in love with the game and really, just sinking their teeth into Netrunner. If you had to pick, and this can include rotated cards. If you had to pick a favorite Corp card, what would it be?
A favorite Corp card? That's a very easy question, and the answer is Tsurugi. I am very much an RP fan. I played RP for years. Even after it stopped being competitive. And Tsurugi was definitely my favorite card in that list. It's a good end-the-run sentry. It's extremely taxing when you want it to be. And in RP, it just checks all the boxes of stuff that you need in that deck.
Okay, and what about your favorite runner card?
My favorite runner card is definitely Account Siphon.
Yeah, that is what I am talking about. Account Siphon, best card in Netrunner.
Definitely. Period. You know it.
Yeah.
Account Siphon is actually the only legal card moving forward, so.
Yeah, it's just, 43 copies of Account Siphon and 3 Sure Gambles. That's your whole deck.
Yeah. Get your binders out.
So, when you think about, let's talk a little bit about, because it's interesting that you pick Account Siphon because Account Siphon was a very contentious card for a very long time in organized play. So talk to me about, when you imagine a card like Account Siphon and how it relates to organized play. Like, talk to me about how you envision that card or cards like its place. You know, I guess what I'm getting at is, you know, we've had kind of jokingly discussions of negative play experience in the community lately. You know, how do you feel, or to what degree do you feel it's your place as an OP manager to kind of try to manage that and weigh in on that?
I want to start by saying there are going to be a couple formats that NISEI is supporting moving forward. The two biggest ones are going to be Standard, which is good old-fashioned Netrunner that everyone expects. The other major format we're going to be supporting is Eternal, which is the entire card pool. So a card pool that never grows smaller, only larger. Nothing ever rotates. And I have two very different philosophies for these two, arguably, very different formats. So for the Standard environment, we want to focus on quality of play experience, and we're definitely not interested in things that are NPE. So we're testing like our second draft of the next MWL at the moment, and one of the cards on the restricted list is Scarcity of Resources, because frankly it's not a fun card to play against. It's extremely oppressive. It can decide a game just by having it in your opening hand in certain matchups.
One copy of it in an opening hand can decide Worlds 2017.
Can decide the World Championship, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm very much against like negative play experiences, and another important aspect of that card is that it's completely uninteractive. Your opponent is not interacting with that card, and in fact is unable to interact because of that card. Compare that to, say, CTM, and I don't want to comment on CTM's status on the most wanted list just yet. But CTM is it's very strong, but it's inherently interactive, right? Like it's
punishing you for something you're doing.
Yes, correct. It's making you interact with your opponent, or its ability triggers off of said interaction. So that's a very different card. Account Siphon is inherently interactive. I can promise you it will not be coming back in the next core set. It's not in the next Standard environment. But it is one of my favorite cards. It's very interactive. It is very strong, and it can lead to a lot of negative play experiences for the court player. That said, I think playing around Account Siphon was like a core skill in Netrunner for a long time.
I agree. And the other thing, I feel like we're in kind of a weird place in some degree, because I feel like cards have been rotated right as we're getting the cards that make it easier to play around them. So it's just like, oh man, Siphon is this huge problem. So we got to get rid of Siphon. But now high profile target exists. If people played Tag Me Account Siphon now, like they used to with Anarch, you siphon me to 0. Click for a credit, play high profile target, you're dead.
I want to say I did make it to top 16, and I did not get high profile targeted once playing a Tag Me deck, Tag Me Liza. I did get killed with Boom out of Sports Metal, which I definitely did not expect.
Yeah, that's spicy.
I sat down and told the guy I had specifically teched my deck against Sports Metal, and I'd only lost a single game, which was to some guy on JNet playing Boom, and turns out I was playing the same guy like round 5 of Magnum Opus, and he killed me, which I deserved. And I did win a game with 74 tags, so I don't know so much about...
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like people often said, you know, once you're thrown... The big argument against Siphon is, like, in the days of, like, the Reyna headlock and, like, the Dumble Fork with the Siphons and everything, where it's just, like, if you're not a strong player, once you get thrown into hell, it's very difficult for you to climb out. Right?
Correct, yeah. I think Diversion of Funds is a great... I mean, there are a lot of cards that, like, replaced cards that had rotated as more balanced versions, like Paragon replacing Desperado, and I think Diversion of Funds replacing Account Siphon is one of the best designed ones.
I agree, 100%. So, another question that I want to ask you, when we think about, you know, organized play going forward, explain kind of, for those of us watching who may not be as familiar with how organized play works, like as an organization, what exactly is your role? What does it mean to be the manager of organized play for a game?
Well, as organized play manager suggests, I am in charge of all Netrunner organized play moving forward after October 22nd, which is when FFG's license ends. And this I've kind of split into two main areas. The first is going to be the events themselves and the prize support that's going to be happening at those events and all the logistical things involved in that. And the other half of that is going to be the formats we support and rotation and the respective most wanted lists for those formats. So those are two very different areas, and I can touch on each one of them. But I'm very much trying to focus on casual play, especially at this point in the game, because we really need to keep...
We need to keep metas going.
Yes, yeah, we need to keep players engaged, especially people who are not necessarily competitive players, who are casual players. I definitely want to focus on them. I don't want them to feel ignored, because they're just as much, if not more, a part of Netrunner as people like you and I who enjoy traveling and going to tournaments and things like that.
Oh, I enjoy traveling and going to tournaments, but I am 100% a casual. I'm so bad at this game. But I think that's very important. And can you? I know a lot is in the works and a lot of the gears are moving, but can you expand on some of the hypotheticals you have on ways we're maybe diverging from FFG to try to engage both casual and competitive players?
Yeah. So a few points regarding that. The FFG structure for organized play, like store championships, moving on to regionals, nationals, continentals, worlds, worked reasonably well. And so we're going to try to emulate that, but improve upon it in a few ways. One thing that I'm very much focusing on is going to be game night kits, because those are geared exclusively towards casual players. So we're bringing back Playmats. We're already making the Playmats, the first Playmats for the winter game night kit, which ideally is going to be available within the next month, and then in tournament organizers' hands by December at the latest. So we're still going to be doing quarterly game night kits. There's going to be a big focus on those. In each one of those, you're going to find an insert that has advice on running a league or like alternate formats that you can run, like the NAPD 3 versus 1,
Nice.
Things like that. And like posters you can put up in your game night, or in your local game store, just to get people coming to these nights, get people interested, make people want to come back for the next league night, that kind of deal. And then in terms of like store championships and such, there's going to be a very casual focus at store championships themselves, because again, we want those game night kit players to come to the store championship and kind of fall in love with that competitive scene as well. Because one thing I really hate that's prevalent in other card games, particularly Magic the Gathering, is that competitive versus casual mentality that people have. And I don't want Netrunner to adopt any more of that than it already has. I want everyone to feel welcome at tournaments. And our three main goals for organized player, we want everyone to be able to participate in organized play. We want everyone to want to participate in organized play. And we want everyone to enjoy organized play.
Yeah, I think
so. Moving along with that,
that's good.
Yeah, so moving along with those three principles, we also have a code of conduct that Alice and other members of the edit team have made for us that we're going to be taking very seriously. And another, like, something we're planning for our website, working with RC on this, is like listing all the venues that Netrunner events might be run at and like accessibility options and things of that nature. Just so everyone knows exactly what to expect.
Yeah, and I think a big part going forward that is something that was discussed in the future, and I've also discussed with members of the board, is untethering kits from stores. Obviously, there are going to be many metas that are still based out of stores where the owners are still supportive of the Netrunner community. But I think in some areas, removing that lock and key that the stores have on access to Netrunner like
Yes.
kits and things
That's
will
gonna
be
be
very nice, because then you can have the person who's interested in maintaining a meta in that area, regardless of whether or not the store is interested in doing it. They will have the ability to do that.
Yeah, so anyone will be able to order a game night kit from us directly from NISEI. Again, this is a non-profit labor of love, so we are selling them for not anything more than FFG did, and eventually for less. At the moment, it's going to be the same price because everything up front has been out-of-pocket costs for us, so we need to be reimbursed for that, as well as kind of building a bit of a nest egg for NISEI so that we can purchase better prize support and stuff like that up front in the future without dipping into our own credit cards. And so in the future, we're going to try to drive that cost down even further. And the same thing with new expansions when those come out. As far as like store championships and regionals kits, for those, you will not have to go through a store to order one. However, you will have to prove to us that you are running an event with it.
Right, you can't just buy it and put the prize support on eBay.
Correct, yeah. You can't just buy a regionals kit and put it on eBay. But you will, not like it would help because anyone would be able to buy a regionals kit, but you will have to be able to prove to us that you're running an event. That's not the case with a game night kit. You can buy as many as you want within reason.
Right. Well, because I know some metas like Chicago that have like a really robust tournament scene. Their stores currently buy like stacks of the kits, and then every week they'll run a GNK. Like,
yeah, that happens here in Detroit as well. We get a lot of that where stores will just buy a dozen kits at a time, and then every week they're like, here's some stuff, you know. But we definitely do want to disconnect that from stores so that anyone can purchase a kit to run an event, anytime, any place.
I like it. Yeah, I think it's a good way to move forward, and it's a good way to let the people who are really motivated to maintain the game do that work, right? They're able to do that work. So moving on, just more getting to know you, Austin. Tell me, what's your favorite ID in Netrunner?
Runner or corp or overall?
We could do both. What's your favorite runner?
My favorite runner, I guess mechanics-wise, is Leela, and one who unfortunately will not be returning in the new core set, but we may yet see her again. I really love her ability. It's interactive by its very nature. It just felt very cool to me. Unfortunately, it does have the ability to snowball in some rare cases where you can just run the corp over if they get a bad starting hand, a bad mulligan, for example. But I think she plays very cool. I like that ebb and flow of the game where the corp scores, and now that has set them back, and now the runner's ahead, and Leela really emphasizes that.
Yeah.
Andromeda, of course, I played a lot more of just because she's more competitive.
Well, so what makes an ID interesting for you? Because obviously, you know, if we're going to talk about like competitive IDs, right? Everybody has like their favorite ID that's like really good. And sometimes they overlap with the mechanics that they like. But what makes an ID really interesting for you?
For me, it's interactivity, because that's what this game is all about. I mean, I wouldn't fly across the Atlantic to play Netrunner if I wanted to play Netrunner at you, and you get to watch, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, so what's your favorite corp ID?
I would have to say RP. I played... Jinteki is my favorite faction.
Old school in it.
I played a ton of RP for years, like since it came out until it rotated, basically. And I mean, it forces the runner to run your centrals to interact with those ice. It's taxing, so it click compresses the runner, which I always thought was kind of a cool way of keeping them out of your remote server, as opposed to something more traditionally glaciary, like just them not having enough money. Yeah,
and I mean, I had a feeling you were going to say RP, both because I'm familiar with your online persona, and also because when you say Sarugi is your favorite ice,
peas in a pod.
then they're kind of like good. They go well together. A Sarugi on
Yes.
Essential and RP is just like the good stuff.
That's the dream.
Yeah, that's the good stuff.
Surprise Sarugi on Archives.
Yeah. So while we're talking about IDs, what's an ID that you were excited about when it was spoiled or when you heard about it, and then it just didn't land the way you thought it would?
So Kronos Protocol, the Jinteki one that actually exists. I had an enormous amount of fun playing this identity when it first came out, or rather when it was first spoiled. I just like printed it out and was like making decks with it, and I was kind of disappointed that it never really became tournament playable. I think it was missing a lot, but it was definitely a really fun ability to play around. It feels very Jinteki to me, and I just wish that it had more of a tournament presence.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a weird, almost like Scorpios-like effect, but it's more pointed. It's like you're halfway between being Scorpios and Salem's Hospitality in like an ID. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it doesn't actually give you a way to win the game, which is it's where it falters. It just lets you selectively trash a card out of their hand, but you have to be constantly doing net damage to really capitalize on this, especially if you're trying to like take out breakers or something. And there are other decks that just do this so much better, and other cards that do this better, like Hunter Seeker.
Right, and the other cards that make it really shine and work are things that you have to import for 2 influence or more, like Arc Lockdown.
Yeah, or like Caligoda was pretty good in there for only 1 influence, which was nice. Which like lets you look at the top card of their deck, and if it's a breaker, you chuck it in the bin. But you can only do that at the beginning of their turn, and the runner can trash it because it's an asset. And if they just click to draw more than 1 card, they're going to dig past it anyways. So,
yeah,
what can you do?
Yeah, no, I'm picking up what you're putting down. So, when you think about when you were, putting in that application, and when the announcement came out, the jacking out announcement came out, talk to me about what motivated you to step forward. What were you excited to work on that made you apply for the organized play management position?
So when that announcement hit, I was in Europe like 3 days after Euros or 4 days after Euros. I just got into my best friend's flat in Edinburgh, and I was like less than a quarter of a way through my Euro trip vacation. And it really like pumped the brakes on my vacation. I'm like, could this be some kind of joke? Like maybe some FFG intern is pranking us. Like everything looks like it's smooth sailing with this game, and suddenly they're just pulling the rug out from under us. So it was really devastating. But in the time since then, I've definitely changed my opinion, and I'm viewing this more as the beginning of a new era of Netrunner. And there's so much more that we can do now that we're not tied down by this, capitalist model of this game is being produced for profit. So there's a lot of cool stuff ahead. I think Netrunner's best days are still ahead of it. And when I initially applied, I actually left the application half finished for a week, and I kind of filled out one more question every day on my lunch break and kind of waffled on it, but I did create the Ashes player circuit for Ashes Rise of the Phoenixborn, so anyone who's played that may be familiar.
It's a great game. It's a great game that was also killed by parent company acquisition and BS.
Yeah, and I had a kind of a personal falling out with someone that I was working very closely with, once I got on the design team and the dev team for that game. Which is largely why I quit playing it and came back to Netrunner. Anyways, all that aside, I'm mostly excited to be working on prize support. That, to me, is really cool. And I already have... I just got in this week the final draft of the artwork for the first alt art card and our winter playmat. So the winter playmat is like a futuristic cyberpunk wintry cityscape. and the first alt art is going to be Rashida Jaheim.
I feel like that card gets played periodically. You know, it's not in... Well, it's in every deck. Yeah, it's in every
Occasionally.
deck. Occasionally it shows up in decks.
Yeah.
But yeah. No, I think that's all good stuff to be excited about. I think the biggest thing for me... you know, we reached this weird point. You know, I've been playing since Genesis Cycle. I didn't quite pick up the game at core. But you know, people got like jaded on the playmats. But as somebody who runs a lot of tournaments, there's something about like when we would have new people join the local meetup and they win that first playmat from getting, you know, top 4 in a GNK or top 3 in a GNK or like top 4 in a store championship. And it's just, there's something really delicious, like good feels from like having that person who's in that early stage of just like digging into this game where it gets its hooks in you and you first really start playing it and understanding it. And when you get that first mat that you earn, it's like this huge deal for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And it certainly was for me, like that first GNK, even though I didn't do well at it. I remember the whole tournament. It was a fantastic experience, and I really miss like the playmats that came in GNKs. Like my laptop is sitting on a Project Vitruvius GNK playmat right now, and I'm really excited to be bringing those back. And because I think they were like a staple, and then FFG kind of cheaped out on us.
Yeah, I have 3 of the. I won 3 of the smoke mat, so I have 1 on my wall because I framed the ones that I win, just as keepsakes. And then I use 1 as a mouse pad at work, and then I have another one under my keyboard and mouse in my basement. But yeah, it's incredible. So while we're talking about like tournaments, community moments, you know, you're obviously somebody who's very committed towards having these in-person play experiences. That's why you're interested in organized play. That's why you're willing to fly across the Atlantic to play. So what are some of your favorite moments that either you've personally experienced or you've been a part of that kind of has made the game special?
So my favorite Netrunner experience of all time is very recent. I have to say is Magnum Opus. For starters, like any chance to drive almost 3,000 kilometers is right up my alley because I'm a car enthusiast and I love to drive. And Worlds is always a great excuse to do so. So we hopped in the car, drove 14 hours all the way. It was a fantastic trip. And just like seeing so many familiar faces, meeting so many new people. That was the first time I'd met you in person. And like meeting other members of the board in person was really cool. And I was approached by tons of people that's like, hey, you're part of NISEI, like, here are my thoughts, like, give me some scoops, those kind of things. And that was really cool. But mostly just like making memories with friends at Netrunner tournaments, particularly big events like Gen Con and Euros and Worlds. This year, Magnum Opus is always really fantastic. I'm looking forward to so much more of that in the future. We've already got a short list of venues for the next World Championship. We've narrowed down the city and country. I can tell you it's not in North America. So I'm extremely excited for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited too. It'll give me an excuse to visit all of the lovely people from the European and United Kingdom metas that are always coming to visit us.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. It's definitely not fair to anyone outside of North America that Worlds has been in Minnesota all this time.
But yeah, so, you know, obviously there's a lot that goes into creating moments like these and making people, you know, willing to, you know, drive these great distances, come to these tournaments and share these memories. But, you know, if you had to focus on something that the community can do as part of organized play, what do you think is the biggest thing that they can do to help replicate these types of moments that we've all had for people who may be less veteran to the game or might be joining the game in the future?
Sure. So I have to say the biggest challenge in my mind is that when you walk into your local game store, or very shortly after October 22nd, when you walk into your game store, Netrunner no longer has a presence in that store. It just doesn't exist. It's not on the shelf anymore. Someone can't just walk up and look at the box and say, oh, this looks cool, I'm going to buy this. And so we have to be that presence in those stores. You and I and everyone running a GNK, everyone playing Netrunner, going to local meetups, like, has to be that presence in those stores so that people that walk in can see this game and say, hey, what is this thing that you're playing? Oh, this looks cool, I want to get involved. And we have to get those players engaged, start teaching those people, league nights, posters, Facebook events, anything to get people wanting to come back to play more Netrunner.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is, I think one of the biggest selling points for recovering players that we maybe have lost along the way is you can say, hey, you don't have to buy any packs now.
Right, it's free now, and that's huge.
Yeah, the game's free. Oh, you quit in Mumbad Cycle, or you quit when Cipher was printed?
I understand.
Yeah, I understand.
Never again.
Print the card. Go on a coup where you can get all the cards in those big sheets, right, where all the card arts are directly next to each other. Print it out, cut it out, and put it in front of other cards. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like,
and you can take those to tournaments now. You can take those to the World Championship. If that's your Netrunner collection, that's fine. That's not going to be a problem. And allowing proxies is going to be huge, I think. And definitely make the game more accessible for players, especially once real product becomes more and more scarce as time goes on. Because as we both know, it's selling out pretty quickly, pretty much everywhere, at least here in North America.
Yeah, there's not much, like, there's slim pickings of bad data packs in random stores.
Yes, yeah, old data packs. The Source. There's a lot of on the shelf at my local store.
Yeah, wonder why.
Right. And another thing that's huge about Netrunner being free for new players is that when someone walks into a game store with $50 in their pocket, every single game on that shelf is competing for that $50 bill in their pocket, right? Except for Netrunner. Now, Netrunner's just a freebie. Anyone can have it. Like, all you have to do is walk into a game store and see people playing Netrunner and say, like, hey, this looks like a cool game, will you teach me, or, like, tell me something about it. And it doesn't cost anything now, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that's a huge selling point going forward. Is just also, you just have to be visible. It's something you've come back to multiple times over the course of this interview, is people just need to continue being visible while they play, so they have that chance to engage new people who haven't heard about the game.
Right. My buddy and I just went to a bar, like a barcade in downtown Detroit, like last week, and we're shuffling up our decks, getting ready for a game, and this guy walks up to us and he says, "Are you playing Modern or Standard?"
Oof.
And I was like, "Listen, dude, you have so much to learn."
Yeah, let me tell you a little story about hidden information. Well, I mean, but this is something, just if we can wax philosophical about Netrunner, this is something I was discussing with my brother. My brother, who's pretty good has only ever really played Magic. I've gotten him to play Netrunner a couple times, but he plays Magic with his sons. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest things is, when you play Magic or Hearthstone, these are solid, well-designed games. But what I was discussing with him after I got him to play Netrunner is he got to experience that kind of like analysis paralysis of Netrunner, because everything about Netrunner is a choice except for the corp draw. Whereas in Magic, you draw a card at the start of your turn. Generally speaking, you're going to be playing 1 mana at the start of a turn. And you're limited by this kind of scaling resource pool, generally speaking. Obviously, there's all sorts of combos and things that exist. But in Netrunner, everything is something that you build, either before the game even began, in the deck building process, or as you're piloting. Like, one of the most incredible things of Netrunner is that you can run yourself out of resources.
Yes, yeah.
which is something that almost no other card game is bold enough to let its players do. Say, oh yeah, by the way, you can completely break your deck while you're playing.
My absolute favorite game of Netrunner. I was playing DLR Max in that brief period where Criminal was pretty much unplayable in the competitive meta, against RP, and on his last possible turn before I milled him out, he scored a Hades fragment, and like I had no way to get into archives or HQ, and he just like methodically, very slowly built the server and scored out of it, and there's nothing I could do about it because I had like made decisions 30 turns earlier, never anticipating that he had a Hades fragment in his deck or was going to score it.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. Yeah. And also just like the hidden information of Netrunner is incredible, but everybody knows that. Like that design mechanic of face down corp cards is just unreal. But so how can the community, you know, we've talked about some attitudes, we've talked about, you know, how to approach kind of recruiting and, you know, maintaining some of the positive behaviors of organized play. Is there any way that formally people can help you in your mission of keeping organized play alive? Like if somebody wanted to volunteer to assist with organized play type tasks, how would they do that?
Yeah, so there's actually two ways that you can go about that. And first I want to say that our recruitment is not necessarily done. This is our first wave where we're recruiting most of the permanent positions that we're going to need. But there are definitely more that we're going to need people working very closely with us. But in addition to that, it was recently posted on Facebook. I posted one and David, our lead developer, posted as well. I put out a short survey for people who are interested in running events in the future. And this isn't like a commitment to run an event or an order form for a kit or anything. It's just you letting us know that you exist. So like we can reach out to you in the future when we need someone to run a regional in Manitoba. We can call you up and say, hey, you know, you expressed interest in this. Are you still interested? Here's what we can do to get a kit into your hands. Here's all the resources that we have to help you organize a successful event. And that's for anyone interested in running even like a game night kit, all the way up to someone interested in helping out with a national championship. So I can send that link to you, Dan, if you want to put it in the show notes or
that'd be great.
Whatever we want to do. Okay, let me drop it.
Yeah, I'll put that in the VOD once it gets done uploading after the interview. So it'll be there tomorrow when people are watching. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. And the other one is for playtesting. Playtesting is not just for new cards. We also need playtesters for the most wanted list and rotation, which is something that I've worked very closely with David and Greg on. And I actually have a team of people that I've brought on board that are going to be helping us create most wanted lists for our various formats that we're going to be supporting. But of course, those changes are going to need playtested. So if you're interested in becoming a playtester, either for that or for new NISEI cards that are going to be coming out, there's a form that David has that you can fill out, and then if he thinks that you're qualified and up to the task, he will reach out to you, and we can bring you on board for that.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's something, especially if we continue to expand formats. Yeah, that was just something we were even thinking, testing the very fun 3 versus 1 NAPD format. Mm-hmm. We were already being like, oh man, like you couldn't let like all 3 runners have this current, or you couldn't let everybody play Fisk Investments. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like you'd have to develop specific MWLs for those formats in order to keep them balanced that are completely different. Yeah, for sure.
And I want to say that Standard and Eternal are going to be our main focus. But we don't want to necessarily neglect any other formats. And the 3 versus 1 NAPD is definitely something that we want to keep around, particularly for game night kits. There will never be a 3 versus 1 tournament, sorry. At least not in any formal capacity. But that's definitely something we're interested in keeping around for casual players and maintaining, so that I think that format is already pretty much solved, at least in terms of the corp deck. And so there may be actions that we're going to take to kind of curtail that and make sure that it remains a healthy format.
Okay. So if the answer to this question is also account siphon, we'll pick another card. But what is a card that you would bring back from rotation, and why would you bring it back?
Well, as it turns out, I do have this power. And there is a card that is being brought back from rotation, and that card is Tsurugi. Which
wow, I'm very shocked.
In the new core set.
Yeah, I'm very shocked.
There are some other favorites that'll be coming back.
I saw a wild oversight AI on that table.
Yeah, I did post some spoilers of a playtest game of Blue Sun versus Gabe that my buddy and I were getting some games in with the most recent draft of the core set, and that is, I have to say, technically subject to change. I very much expect Blue Sun and Oversight AI to remain in that list, but that is ultimately not my decision. That's up to Greg and David.
But yeah,
Coddy Jones and Dirty Laundry were other cards that were...
I can finally use my Coddy Jones alt arts again.
Yeah, and there will be a Coddy Jones playmat coming and another alt art. So.
Yeah, it's good.
And she is one that is definitely locked in, so I would expect to see a lot of her in the future, and expect to see her getting thrown under a lot of buses.
Yeah, absolutely.
That card's going to be pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting, yeah, especially when you mention it. Like, there's so many interesting mechanics that exist now that make things that had previously been very oppressive less oppressive. Like, there's so many ways to get rid of connections now, and resources in general, but also connections, that, like, if you're basically playing against any green deck, you have to ask yourself, how long am I going to keep putting money on this Coddy Jones before I bail? You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right. If she gets blown up with 27 credits on her, like, you did that to yourself, it's your own fault. I don't feel bad for you.
You've done this to yourself. Right, exactly.
Yes, yeah.
So I think we've covered some good ground here, but I can't begin to imagine everything that's going on behind the scenes that we can't see, with all the wheels that are turning with NISEI, trying to get everything ready for the end of this year and the new year. So is there anything about organized play that you feel like we didn't touch on that you want to make sure that we mention?
Yeah, so one thing I really want to mention is there's a lot of people that are prying for details from us, and until October 22nd, this is still FFG's game, and so there's not much that we can really do until then. And so a lot of people are saying, like, oh, you haven't done anything. Yes, we have. Like, we've spent thousands of hours between us organizing and planning all the various things we're doing. There's an entire rules rewrite that's going on. I've been rewriting all of the tournament regulations and policies. We've onboarded all of our staff. We've produced prize support. There's all kinds of stuff going on behind the scenes that we can't really be terribly open about at the moment. But following up October 22nd, I promise you there's going to be a massive announcement with all kinds of stuff that's been going on, all kinds of stuff you can look forward to. It's just until after that date, our hands are kind of tied in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I get that 100%. And now you mentioned you had the survey for the people who could potentially do organized play events in the future. We'll make sure we link that. If people are interested in becoming like MWL playtesters and other things like that, is there somewhere specific they should go?
Yeah, David has also made like a Google form that you can fill out. It's just a short application. So I'll send you that link as well.
Perfect.
And then David will be reaching out to those people that he thinks are qualified and capable of doing the job. And hopefully we can get you on board. But we have a great MWL team, and Chris Dyer is leading our playtest team. And he's also on our MWL team. So I'm really excited to be working with him in regards to that.
Nice. I like that. So is there any plugs or announcements that you'd like to make before we close it down for the evening?
I think that's it. More than anything else, just get out there and play Netrunner. If you were thinking about playing Netrunner on your kitchen table, like maybe go do it at a coffee shop. Maybe go do it at a game store. And just get the game out there, be visible, let people know what Netrunner is, and hopefully we can keep our favorite hobby going for a long time. And I firmly believe that Netrunner's best days are ahead of it. So it's up to us to make that happen.
Yeah, and I think that's great. And I think for my part, something I was noticing, I'm one of a handful of people like Dave Laird, and a couple other people like Sean Duncan, who actually like post on the Netrunner Instagram tag, which seems like a small thing, but I post under Netrunner and card games a lot of time, and I do get people in my extended like gaming friends group being like, "What's that game you're playing?" So like, be visible. Like the answer is just be visible while playing. Take pictures of you having fun playing Netrunner. Put it up on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, so people have that opportunity to be like, "What is this cool game you're playing?"
Right, just go out there and exist. I'm pretty sure that Adam and I deciding to play Netrunner at a barcade downtown as opposed to his kitchen table just got a new Netrunner player because this guy came up to us who played Magic and started talking to us about this game that we were playing, and we explained it to him, we sold it to him, and he's interested. That's all it takes. Just be visible.
Yeah, yeah. So, Austin, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really looking forward to what we're going to see from you, and I think it's going to be a lot of really good things, so I'm very pumped.
Yeah, I am super excited for the future of Netrunner, particularly organized play, and I'm excited to see it, hopefully before then, but at least at the next World Championship.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody who's watching, there's been a bunch of people in the chat. I know I haven't been answering the questions, but I wanted to kind of focus on keeping the interview going. Make sure to put any questions that you have in the comments below. I'm going to put those links that Austin referenced in the show notes, and so we can keep the discussion going. There will also be a link to this video in the future channel on the StimHack Slack, so you can follow up with me or Austin there. And until we see all of you again, always be running.